feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.
Hey everybody, welcome to our New Year's kickoff show here in 2022 for the Shrimp Tank. I'm your co-host Ted Jenkin with my co-host Lee Hosman and our guest today, David Lefkovits. We'll bring him in just a minute today. He's a fabulous entrepreneur, done many different things. We're going to talk about the Lefko Group. We're going to talk about niche brands and a bunch of other things. And most importantly, we'll talk a little bit to him about his philosophy on leadership and entrepreneurship. And we're excited to talk about that today. As always, you can get a replay of all of our broadcasts at shrimptankpodcast.com. Lee and I have done more than 325 interviews of some of the brightest and best CEOs and business owners in and around the city of Atlanta and the state of Georgia and across the United States. Folks, the Shrimp Tank is just booming. We'll be opening up cities this year in Denver, Colorado. We're going to be opening up in Savannah, Georgia. We're already in huge cities. We're in Boca Raton. We're in Charleston. We're in Boston. I really recommend that if you're serious about taking your entrepreneur game to the next level and you want to learn either how to start a business and stop being a wantrepreneur here in 2022 and become an entrepreneur, listen to this podcast, watch these videos, go to our YouTube channel, make sure that you check out all the videos that we've done with more than 1,000 entrepreneurs across the country. Big ones I'm talking about, Lee, like Tony Horton, big ones here in Atlanta like Jim Ellis of Jim Ellis Chevrolet and so many other business owners. So, and as always, by the way, don't listen to that radio crap in your car. You want to make sure that you download us at Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or anywhere around the internet. Now, Lee, I want to give you, to start this before we bring in David, I want to give you my 2022 term that I think you're going to hear more over this year. You want to know what it is?
I always do.
The term is shrinkflation. Shrinkflation is the term.
Interesting. Well, you know, and Ted,
you want to know what that is?
Does that have to play into anything? Because I think in November we had 4.5 million resignations of employees, of course. Does that tie into that?
No, this is not a Costanza episode, by the way. It's not a Costanza episode for those that are Seinfeld fans. We're not talking about that kind of shrinkflation. What we're talking about here, Lee, is that, look, big corporations in America, business owners, they have an insatiable appetite for profits. They want to be able to grow. And when you look at inflation that hit 6.8% towards the end of last year, big companies, they're not going to lose money, so they have to figure out a way how to increase their profit margins. Now, what happened in the 1970s when we had double-digit inflation, you may remember as a kid, the Ticonderoga #2 pencil. Remember that pencil?
Of course.
Yes. Well,
sometimes I got a #3 and #4, and it was the weirdest pencil. And you're like, what is this about? And it wouldn't work on the Scantron bubbles.
What they did in order to sustain and grow profitability is they used to send the pencils in packs of 30, and they just cut it down to packs of 24. So what companies are doing now, like Aleve, that just went from 100 caplets in a bottle to 90 caplets in a bottle. Companies like Crest, who just took their medium-sized toothpaste from 4.1 ounces to 3.8 ounces, and brands on Amazon like their own dishwasher pods that went from 3.37 pounds to 2.79 pounds, all at the same price. Companies are going to say, we're just going to narrow down the contents of what's in your package just by a little bit so you won't notice, and we'll charge you the same price. And Lee, if people are not paying attention to it, that, my friend, is what is going to be shrinkflation.
Well, Ted, I know the other night you spent 2 hours prepping for a news segment on CNN, so I'm going to guess that's coming out on CNN.
It's coming on CNN this weekend, so yeah, you have to check it out. But I got to tell you, I really believe that that's going to be in here. And as you know, a lot of business owners are dealing with the Omicron and what to do in this sort of COVID spike part 2. It could be challenging times. So we're excited, folks, this year. Our guests, I think we're booked out till June this year, Lee.
We are.
Somewhere in that ballpark. So I want to bring in David Lefkovits. He's our guest today. I had some pre-conversation with here, so I feel like this is going to be a fun interview today and a lot to talk about. But I think I just start off, and I'd love for you to be able to just give us a little background on how the Lefko Group came about, and obviously your newer company, Niche Brands, and how those came about and how you started them.
Well, first of all, I'm very relieved to hear that shrinkflation did not apply to me. I thought maybe Lee had called my wife and she had commented on my manhood. So very interesting topic. So I grew up in South America in a family of entrepreneurs. I've been working since I was 7. Weekends, I didn't get an allowance, but I made a shit ton more money by working. And so I worked for my father, even when I came to college in the US, came back for vacation, would party until 3 a.m. and still wake up at 6 and go to work. And so I think that work ethic is what has propelled me to start all these businesses. And really it's a way of life. It's my lifestyle. It's what I love to do and what I enjoy the most.
David, so, I had the fortune, Ted, of visiting with David. I'd met David at, a friend of the Shrimp Tank, Cliff Oxford at the Oxford Center. Cliff's been a friend for years and been a guest from years ago, but I had the opportunity to sit in front of David at an event. Of course, we immediately connected with the energy level, and I made my way out to his office. And Dave, I'd like you to discuss a little about your current business, because I couldn't try to describe what you do. I walked away, Ted, with just one little item here, or a pack of many, many socks that are popular in the equestrian world. But then I walked to an office that not only has so many other products, and then I saw these unbelievable pictures of dogs as well, Dave. I just love you to discuss all of the details. It is literally David's office is a definition of the cornucopia of the number of businesses. It doesn't matter what business you have, David's going to run it. Could you describe, Dave, your current endeavors? Because I was blown away walking through your office and the diversity of businesses that you have.
Sure. So this is my 4th company, and when I first started Niche Digital Brands, the goal was to build a portfolio of brands that targeted massive markets with niche and specialized products. So I've always believed, the harder, the more complex the business model, the more unique and differentiated the product. That's me, right? Build those moats around the business. And so I decided to go into the pet industry. Even though I was not a pet lover back then. Now I'm crazy about my dogs. In fact, last year I was walking my 2 Maltipoos outside the neighborhood, and this Jeep with these young girls stopped and yelled, "You must have a big dick." So anyway, I love my little Maltipoos. But when I first started this, it was a marketer's dream to be in an industry where there's such emotional connection between customers and the product, right? In this case, people and their dogs. And so my first brand was a pet portrait, online pet portrait platform. And essentially, there's thousands of really talented artists everywhere, right? But I had not seen anything that was handling this at scale on a nationwide level. And for me, it's all about systematization and processes and workflow to be able to scale things. So it started looking into this. Within the first 6 months, we had done close to 480,000 in sales. And anyway, that's where we took off. We did dogs, cats, iguanas, birds. We do a lot of horses because, as I'll explain now, equestrian is one of our 10 niches, 10 verticals, but it's one of our bigger verticals.
And Dave, just to give perspective, so you're aware, when he talks about portraits, Ted, we're talking about canvas artwork of the animals. And if I'm incorrect, they can have little outfits on them. It literally looks very formal of your animal. You know how people love their dogs and their pets and their cats, of course.
Yeah.
It was a genius move. And when I walked through, I was like, "Oh, Dave, what's this?" He's like, "Oh, that's my organization as well." And it's high quality, Dave, as well. Yeah.
And essentially what we did there, because this is where you start thinking about how do you incorporate a workflow to really scale businesses. And so, you can't scale a business like this by doing physical acrylic portraits. So we have a pretty extensive team of digital artists. They hand draw these portraits, but they use tablets and sophisticated software. So the only difference is you don't have to let the paint dry. And then we print these on canvas, frame it. We do all kinds of blankets, pillows, and other accessories based on that imagery. And so it's a highly emotional product. I think half the people that receive them actually cry when they get them. I mean, we do memorial portraits, celebration portraits, and it's a huge gift item. So that was sort of the first brand. The next brand, C4, was a company that I acquired when it was still in its infancy. They were doing solid color belts.
Ted, C4, C4 guys.
Yeah, C4.
And so all these different solid color belts with tons of different buckle colors. So a lot of fun. And so we started doing all these incredible designs, and we figured out, and this is a proprietary process because it's very difficult printing on flexible substrate, right? Make sure it stays. And so we started using UV digital technology to produce these designs on the belts. And equestrian has become a significant market for us. Any young girl between 10 and I would say 50 years old that rides English discipline, whether it's dressage, eventing, hunter jumping, they probably own one or likely many of our belts. And around that, we built all these specialized accessories like technical equestrian socks, which, are very comfortable. I think Lee wears those to bed. Underwear and those socks up to his knees. So they're a boot sock, they're technical sock, they stay up technology, seamless toe, supportive arch, and equestrians love it. And with that, we offer a bunch of other accessories.
No, there's a real question in here, which I think is interesting, because when you're talking about these kinds of businesses, but now that you've created multiple businesses, where do you recommend a business owner start when they think about just starting to drive sales? A lot of people in the beginning part of a business are like, okay, I have these ideas, I created a product, but like, where do I even start for the best place for me to try to drive sales in a business?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Let me just finish real quick because I don't want to give the impression that we're just equestrian and just belts. So this engineered thermopolymer is a phenomenal material because it's waterproof, sink-proof, hypoallergenic, medical grade. And so we launched dog collars, leashes, Apple Watch bands, keychains. And so we're doing stuff, super interesting stuff that I'll discuss later. But, pragmatically, I think starting a business, we live in wonderful times now because given all the technology capabilities and everything that's out there, it's pretty simple to go out and test something, right? And so, what I look at first as the litmus test before I start any business is, one, is there a strong product market fit? And that can be a little tricky, right? Sometimes you need to get the product out before you know if the product market fit is there or not. But that's a critical part. Two, is it scalable? And is there a market where you can really scale it? Or are there synergies that you can bring other products or other businesses that are complementary to continue scaling? That's the second key litmus test. And so when starting a new company, I typically just like to roll up my sleeves and do it. I start operating as if I was a multinational, even if it's me on my own. I'll pull somebody from another company, another one of my companies to help me with the portraits. We started we started offering these on Facebook. We didn't even have a website initially. And so we saw there was a significant response. Visual content is very conducive towards digital channels. That's where I decided, the product market fit is here. People love it. There's a visceral reaction to it. Let's build a website. And so I think you take step by step, but I think you've got to get out there and start doing things. You can't wait until things are perfect before you get out there.
Ted, I know you had a question. I didn't want to jump into mine and be greedy. Go ahead.
No, I mean that I think that was the idea in here, is that when an entrepreneur starts, a lot of people want to start a business, but the challenge is you don't have a business till you have sales. And so when you think about marketing and trying to drive sales, have you found that there are techniques that have helped you better? And how did you originally consider how much you spent on the brand so people knew about the company, and how much you spent on direct marketing to try to just drive sales?
Yeah. So I will say that I do think that you have a business when you have a robust business model. Now, it's not tested or proved until you have sales, but I think there's different levels of differentiation. And I'll just start with this. You can have a unique product, but products can be replicated. And in the short term, you can have a phenomenal level of service and experience. And in the midterm, it can be replicated. The hardest thing to replicate is a business model. And so I believe that that's the unique differentiation in how you operate, because you think about this, and any business can be revolutionized and disrupted, right? And it's usually the business model that does that. So I think once I feel comfortable that the business model is unique, it works. Yes, later in my professional life, I'm a lot more aggressive. I've got some capital, so I've been able to invest heavily in marketing, jump in there and start doing things. Initially, when you don't and you're having to bootstrap, you've got to, there's a great quote that I love, and it says, it's not about how many resources you have, it's how resourceful you are. And so you like that?
I love that.
Yeah. And so, and still today, I would say that even if it's better when you're tight on cash, because you've got to be resourceful. And there's a lot of ways that happens when you have a big budget or, lots of capital coming in. So I think this is the age for scrappy entrepreneurship. I think you get a lot done very cost effectively. And then once you feel that gut feeling that this is going to fly, you go all in.
Well, and Dave, I got a bigger question because Ted always looks at things, Dave, from the front end. How do we market? How do we sell? And that's absolutely one of the most important things, because you could have the best company with no sales, and you're not going to go anywhere. You're going to fail very quickly. So sales are vitally important. But if that's a 1A, my 1B is always the operations, Dave. I mean, over the past 2 years with COVID, I have to bring that up. You have a lot of organizations that we know. It might be a law firm. People can work remotely. It could be an accounting firm. They all work as individual islands. You need a cohesive organization. I've been through your facility. It's pretty much a manufacturing plant, as well as a distribution center. How have you handled, obviously, when COVID originally hit? And then most importantly, how are you pivoting and adjusting to the new, I would call it COVID light, right? With the new world that we have now. And then also, how do you maintain that environment, or as people say, culture, I use the word environment, with your staff? Because that is so important in your environment.
Well, there's a few questions there, great questions that I'll unpack one by one. But first, let me start by saying that from a culture perspective, and by the way, in businesses, I often when you hear these podcasts and interviews, it feels like some of these entrepreneurs are always successful. They're doing great. I mean, it's highs and lows. I've had situations where for a whole year, I wake up nauseous in my stomach and go to sleep nauseous myself. I have no trouble sleeping, but last year we almost didn't make it with this business because we came in and I had a really good business model. I just hadn't tweaked the profit model. So we were focused on direct to consumer. We were investing significantly in digital marketing and traffic, and the numbers were just not there. Now we built capacity. It helped us front load the business. We implemented an ERP system. We automated all of our systems. So we had to pivot to a different strategy.
David, could you explain for our listeners what an ERP system is? I know sometimes people just glaze over it. You're used to that, of course, but what do you mean by an ERP system, and how did you go through that process of choosing?
Well, my background is software. So, that came natural to me, but initially, you use a lot of different platforms, a lot of different, you'll maybe use QuickBooks for this, you'll use this system for inventory management, you use that system for something else, you use ADP for payroll. And ultimately, as you start scaling and growing, and in our case, we did this very prematurely. I know how complicated and challenging it is to implement something like this later on when you're a much larger organization. So I tend to put sometimes the cart before the horse and get organized, right? So again, this is a very front-loaded business, but it's an enterprise resource planning system, which takes a lot of these functions and combines it into one platform that allows for better visibility, less data discrepancies. It just makes your life a lot easier and is one of the components in allowing you to scale. So going to your second question about COVID, interestingly enough, I don't want to say COVID benefited us, but COVID was a catalyst for our business. But at the same time, it had some significant challenges, but not for the reasons you think. So one is this perfect trifecta happened for us with COVID, which is one, supply chain issues. So our business, the way I would describe what Niche Digital Brands does, is an on-demand marketing platform for personalized and custom premium products. So I know that's a handful, and it really integrates the physical world and the digital world. And so I call it an e-business, right? And so I think there's a lot of companies that are very good at manufacturing, very good at the physical side of things, and other companies are really good at e-com and digital marketing and all this stuff. But when you have to combine those and integrate those silos, that's when it becomes really, really complicated. And that's the business model that we've been able to master. A lot of technology, a lot of workflow. In fact, sometimes I say we're a technology workflow company. So with COVID, supply chain issues became a catalyst for us because most folks out there don't want to hold inventory and they need things quickly. And so everything we do is made to order. We have a lean manufacturing environment, and all these products that we personalize. So the collars, you can put your dog's name and number on it. We're starting to do monogramming on the belts. We have over 20,000 SKUs, thousands of different designs across tremendous amount of categories. And all of these orders come from our websites, from Amazon. Currently, we're doing a lot of B2B dropship. They are put into batches and run through the production system, and we ship them within 2 business days. So anyway, the supply chain challenges made our service offering even more interesting because it's a quick turnaround. Secondly, it 10x'd the online traffic, which obviously helped all of us that sell our products digitally and online. And then lastly, a lot of our verticals align very well with a lot of the behavior tendencies. Like people started getting more dogs. I mean, pet industry has always been hot. For the last 25 years, it's the only industry that's had positive growth every year without exception. But this last year, it's like everybody who now wants to get into pet. Also golf. Golf was in a decline. And now it's, recently, now that we pivoted to B2B, we just rolled out a 7 design of our belts in all PGA Tour Superstores, in all 50 of them. And we're talking about doing an in-store personalization kiosk, which is super interesting. We're already doing that for dog collars at another pet retailer, Pet People. It's an East Coast 72 store. But so COVID to a certain degree was a catalyst for all these things. It made our business model more relevant than ever before. Now, having said that, customer acquisition costs keep going up, and up. And to the point where I think for most direct-to-consumer brands, unless you're a high-frequency product like food or toiletries, or unless you have a subscription service or a really high average order value with a decent conversion rate, it's very, very hard to scale and grow profitably through direct to consumer. Now that's been the case for many years. I mean, Zappos never made a dime in their life before they sold to Amazon. Chewy was the largest e-com transaction, 4.35 billion. In that previous year, they made 850 million with 350 million in losses, right? So for high growth, you're always going to be behind because you're constantly investing in customer acquisition and you need a lot of capital. But for us normal entrepreneurs that don't have hundreds of millions of dollars or don't want hundreds of millions of dollars because we don't want to dilute ourselves, we want to keep control. We do this out of self-expression too. That was not a model. So we burned a lot of cash last year as customer acquisitions rose. But at the same time, that was a catalyst to move us into the B2B dropship space, which has been remarkable for us. So last year was a really tough year in many ways. It was a really good year in other ways. From a cash flow, it really sucked. And now that we pivoted, we have a clear profit model that we finally identified that's going to allow us to continue scaling pretty significantly.
But so Dave, today, right now, we have Omicron, of course. How are you and your staff dealing with that? Still dealing with some supply chain issues? What are you doing in your office to deal with what the world is dealing with just today?
So let me talk about culture. I mean, I happen to believe I'm a very touchy-feely person. I like having my team close. I like seeing people in person. And I personally think that's important to a culture. Now, there are let me rephrase, to our culture. Because there may be other cultures that are perfectly fine with a remote and that's their culture. But for the culture that I've tried to develop, which is, our team is a second family. We're a very flat organization. We're all important. Everybody is equally dignified. For our culture, it's important to be together. Now, what I've always felt is first, you have to have a very strong purpose so you can attract. And I know a lot of people say that in every meeting we have, and we have weekly rhythms for operations meetings, for marketing, for leadership meetings, for customer service, for all of them. We start every meeting with our why. And our why is to celebrate humanity and help people and animals in need. And so all these designs that we do, there's something for everybody. It's about self-expression. It's about being unique. We feel that the day that humanity comes before religion, politics, and ethnicity, and race, the world's going to be a lot better place. And we all strongly believe that. We all now love animals. I was the only one initially that was not really into animals, but now I'm gun-ho completely.
Well, how could you not be, Dave, when you have girls stopping you on the street asking you questions?
Yeah, exactly. Questions. So, hey, and by the way, my answer was no to her. Just FYI. So, culture is set by example initially, and it's through repetition, constant repetition, the same way we do with our children. I mean, I tell my kids 20 times a day to chew with their mouth closed, right? And it just takes repetition. And I'm sure I was chewing like a cow too when I was your age. And eventually it sort of sank in. And so our culture is a lot about speed, innovation. And the way I would describe this is, if you've ever jumped out of an airplane parachuting, and by the way, I have not, so it's a hypocritical example, but let's just imagine that I would jump out of an airplane with a parachute for the first time. Every part of my body would say, don't do it. I'm nervous. I don't want to do it. And if you start doing it every day, it gets better and better to the point where a few weeks later, you're just jumping out, right? It's just innate. You've normalized that. And I think the same thing happens with change and speed and innovation is if you build a culture in your company where it's the right, it doesn't feel natural when things are stagnant and the same. So that expression, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, I fucking hate. Because I don't care how good it is, you can always optimize and make it better. And so how do you create that culture is constant repetition. Everything you do is aligned around that. And there are some things that help, because once you start bringing people that are like-minded from that perspective, the culture lives on. But we do one thing that I think is very, very interesting and we love. And this is the power of inspiration and quotes. Right after, in every meeting, right after we do our why, the person running that meeting does their quote. And every day at the end of the week, I have all these quotes consolidated and I send it to the whole company so they can see the quotes for the week. And if you walk around their office, there's quotes all over on the walls. Now, it's not cliche. Let me tell you why I think this is so important. Because once you repeat, there's not one person in our company that can't tell you what our purpose is or our why. Not one. Not because they had to memorize it, because they say it every day and they've internalized it. But for example, with customer experience, we have one of our most important quotes that we really center around is Maya Angelou. And she says, you can forget what people said and what they did, but you'll never forget the way they made you feel.
I think you have that, Dave. Isn't that in your back room when you enter in on the right-hand side?
It's huge. It's huge on the wall, and it's in the customer service area, Bliss Brigade. When you came, I think everybody was working remote.
They were.
It was a pretty big area, but yeah, we've got it huge. And so instead of telling people, this is how we want you to operate, and this is we tell our customer service team, this is how we want our customers to feel. Now you do whatever you need to do to make them feel that way. And so I think a quote is a good way to help people internalize what that really means and to add that feeling, that emotion. And every time we do a quote at the beginning of a meeting, it inspires us. It brings us closer together to that purpose and to that culture. And so I've got tons of phenomenal, and by the way, the fun thing is, depending on where we are in the week, if things are really tough, you got an inspirational quote that helps lift you up. If you're kicking ass, one that motivates you to continue. So you can use quotes also to set the tone for the meeting and set the tone for the week and set the pace for what you're trying to accomplish. So that to me has worked very, very well in our team. And so even if we have people remote and we're still doing our Zoom meetings, by the way, another thing that we do, and I'll just throw it out there, is we have Monday company huddles, 15 minutes, where every person gets on Zoom and they quickly just say what they did over the weekend. And at the beginning, and that was not my idea, by the way, that was our CEO, Lee, who you met, Patrick, who's no longer with us. But I initially was all about business. I wanted to just talk about what everybody had in store. And he insisted on this. And it was a great decision because you start getting to know people and you start feeling more personally attached to folks. Some people will say that's not great, but for our culture where we want to bring people together, we want to be a family, we want to be a team. And by the way, the loyalty of my team is not with me, is with each other and with our goals.
Well, so David, let me jump into this first. Amazing content and information. I mean, Ted, this is the best part of why we started Shrimp Tank more than 6 years ago, Dave, and we have over 1,000 episodes across the country, is I always get to learn a little nugget from one of the owners that we bring onto the show. So learning a lot, and I want to do some rapid fire with you, if that's right. We usually have a segment in the show where we do what's called hot or not. So we're going to ask you some questions, Dave, and you're going to say if that's hot, liquid hot magma, or it's cold, you don't do it. But just to get some rapid fire, because your expertise, you take for granted the years and the bumps and bruises that you've gotten, obviously, through this process. So hot or not, I've heard the comment before. You've heard this as well. What do you think about it? Hire, slow, fire, fast. Hot or not?
I mean, I think it's lukewarm, and I'll explain why real quick. Yeah, I think you need to be diligent when you hire somebody, but many times, especially when you're a high growth company, you don't have the luxury of time. So I think what you need to do, and this is, speed is the thing I cherish the most. But many people will say, well, if you're too fast, you're going to start screwing things up and not do things effectively. But the key with speed is to put in optimized processes that help you do things faster, still accomplishing the same goals or even better. So we put a few things there. We sprinkle it into the hiring process just to, first we have folks spend time with a lot of our team members. And the first and most important thing is, do they feel like they're a fit? Shooting the shit. I mean, most of my interviews with people are not even based on content. I don't care whether you know accounting or not. I mean, somebody else is going to ask you those questions. I just want to have a sense, do you have the right work ethic? Are you doing this because you need the money, or because you really want to develop a career and you want to be inspired by what you do at work? Now, the other key thing that we do is we have a work style assessment, and we've done DISC and all these things. This one that we use is quite unique because it just to dilute it, it basically tells me how detailed you are or not, how smart you are. Do you like working in groups? Right? And for every role, the profile is different. So we don't even interview somebody. The first step when you apply is you do the work style assessment. And if you don't fit and I don't want to call it fit the mold, but if you don't have these minimum requirements, we don't even spend the time in interviewing. And so the other thing, and I'll just leave it at that because I know this is rapid fire. And when you're, and by the way, this is the difference between an extrovert and an introvert. And an extrovert thinks out loud. So right now I'm rapid fire talking, and I could go on for 3 hours without stopping. So I appreciate.
I know. I don't know in 1,000 episodes, Dave, and it's a compliment to you. By the way, Ted, I spent hours with Dave, and I enjoyed every minute of it. Just so you're aware. So we're getting a small snippet of David's time. I think David might be the first rapid fire hot or not that get one question out in this segment. That might.
Well, let me just finish this one because I think it's important. There's one more thing, and listen, I believe in going deep.
That's what she said. That's what she said, Dave.
Well, I wouldn't know because it's been a few years since I've gotten enough. But so one of the key things here, this is a small nuance, is when we're hiring somebody, and even the email we sent for them to do the profile test or the work style assessment, we asked them, once you complete it, please send us an email confirmation. You can have a perfect work style assessment, but if you didn't send an email saying, hey, listen, I'm done, thank you, but you're not a go. Because one, the instructions, right? You don't, and communication for us is key. That's one of the key things is communication. So that already tells us, and we try to provide some sort of homework, if you will, and it really depends on the role. And it really isn't about the results of the homework, is whether you do it. And if you don't do it, whether you reach out to us and let us know, listen, I wasn't able to complete this in time. So we do a little bit of proofing there for some of the essentials that are non-negotiable for us.
How about a hot or not? You know, you've got all these businesses. Is it hot or not to take on equity partners?
Well, listen, it's so hard to answer these questions because it really depends on so many things. It's like
Right.
saying, "How's your wife?" and you say, "Compared to whose?" Right? And so, I think if you don't have the capital initially, you need to pick up equity partners because you don't want to start with an enormous amount of debt. I think as you start getting traction, like in my case now, cash has been really tight. I mean, we've invested significant amount of resources last year, and so the comfortable thing for me would be to raise equity, but I don't want to dilute myself. So I continue putting myself in more challenging positions, and I keep on building up debt and just pushing out the runway as much as I can because I don't, I'm trying to avoid dilution for many reasons. Because at the end, listen, the way it works, I'm married to a doctor, and what I always explain to her is, she brings the cash flow, I bring her retirement. When you're an entrepreneur in a growing business, you're not making money. All the money goes back into the business. It's like you're fucking poor, right? I mean, and so the money you make is on exit or when you recapitalize, right? And so
Right.
that to me is the most important piece to conserve.
Well, Ted, I know, our time is dwindling down. I know we have to stop in a few minutes. I need to get to my favorite section of the show,
Yeah.
which is our plead the fifth, David. I don't think we shared that with you, but you get to plead the fifth one time during our questions. I will tell you that I would bring David as my champion inside of a room if he's being cross-examined, because he just he is Neo of the Matrix,
yeah.
just dodging bullets left and right. But I am going to ask some direct questions on our plead the fifth. David, you are allowed to plead the fifth one time if it's a question that you're not allowed to speak of or you simply don't want to answer. Ted and I keep score. All of our hosts across the country keep score of who can get their guests to plead the fifth. We don't want it to happen, but we do offer that as an escape valve. But here's a very simple one, Dave, because you're very self-aware. And if I were to ask two people, if I were to ask your staff, and if I were to ask your wife, what is the one thing they would want to change about you, starting with your staff?
Oh, no doubt, my intensity. I mean, it's not easy
hesitate.
for my wife to. It's not easy for my wife to live with me. It's not easy for my team because I'm just pounding constantly, and so the intensity, even though it provides energy, and for you guys it's 45 minutes of fun. Imagine having to cope with this all fucking day, every day.
Wait, do you think we're having fun? Are you thinking we're having fun, Dave? Don't take that for granted.
You guys are, but again, you want to do this all day, every day for the rest
Very
of your
true.
life. And so I think my intensity, but listen, it's just a matter of sometimes tweaking it and putting it under control. And somebody that has, our entrepreneurs, we're just rogue. And even though we like everybody else to follow rules, we don't follow rules. And so we constantly have to be self-aware because, hey, I know my weaknesses very well, and they're really, really strong weaknesses, but they're also the foundation for all my strengths. And so it's a constant, it's a constant struggle. But yeah, let's keep on doing. Let's see if we can get.
What's the worst social media platform out there today?
Honestly, even though we're heavily involved in social media, I'm constantly in it, trying to explore other things. I don't use any of them personally.
I got one, Dave. Amazon.
I hate TikTok because my kids can't get off the damn thing.
Very true.
So I take it personally. I just hate it.
We both hate it, but we respect the genius of it because it is absolutely intoxicating for young people. But Dave, here's a big one. For listeners out there that don't understand, you actually sell your product, as you said, direct to consumer, but you also use Amazon. Give me the best and worst thing of being an Amazon partner and selling your product on Amazon.
Well, first of all, that's a small part of our business now. Most of our business is through drop ship and warehouse programs in B2B. So now we're with Chewy, we have the largest assortment of dog collar designs. We're working with Michaels. We're about to sign an agreement with Netflix. We're a PGA Tour Superstore. I mean, we're doing a lot of things with really large organizations.
Give me the best and worst for Chewy. I know Chewy is one of the biggest partners you have. Give me the best part of working with Chewy and the worst part of working with an organization that large.
Well, I think, honestly, I've been pleasantly surprised with Chewy because I was very apprehensive initially with all the things that you hear. They were very flexible, but it's because we're their sweethearts when it comes to personalized products. Now, the tough thing is terms. We got them down to net 30, which usually they're net 90 or 120. But and they also pile a big percentage, and they allowed us to do a few things to mitigate that. But there's not a lot of flexibility. So with these big organizations, every time we do an integration, an EDI integration or API integration, we're having to spend weeks, if not months, building our integrations around theirs. And so you need a certain level of sophistication to be able to effectively work with big players like that. But come on, bring me something nasty that I want to have.
Who's the one entrepreneur that you've run across in Atlanta that you're like, I will not have lunch with that guy again?
Lee. And I want to tell you, I want to tell you why. I love Lee to death, but he can only eat fifi food. If it's not completely clean, or it's not, I'm like, I can't nourish myself with the fucking food you eat.
Ted, let me tell you,
David, I gotta go today. I have to go today for lunch with Lee. He's got 3 restaurants. It's like True Food, Flower Child, and Kale Me Crazy. Outside of that, I'm like, God damn, I don't want to have a spinach salad every time.
Listen, I'm going to tell you, you guys know Porsche. You know one of the largest manufacturers in the world, of course, the corporate headquarters here. The statement from Porsche says this: their door handles have not changed in over 50 years. You know how bodies change and the body styles of vehicles change. They even modify a little bit. Their door handle hasn't changed in 50 or 70 years. And they said, why? Why change perfection? Yeah. So I'm not a creature of variety, Ted. I like a creature of habit.
Well, yeah. And again, I don't love why change perfection, because nothing can ever be perfect, as I said before. But I will tell you something. This is a question I dodged because I do love Lee and I love eating lunch with him. And the last time we had lunch, I love the food. And I think eating well is critical to being able to operate well. Now I've got a few pounds overweight now that I've got to take care of, but that was my way of dodging that question. Next.
He didn't plead the fifth, he did. So David, listen, we are wrapping up. Of course, we've gone a little bit above, which is perfectly fine. Ted, I told you, David is going to have the biggest personality, more than all of us together. You put 3 Jews on screen and this is what you're going to get. And as you said, I'm not going to say what you said, David, how you described yourself, but if you could tell our listeners, again, your business is amazing. Other than getting in touch with you for your business, also for potential mentorship, seeing your facility, what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Telegraph or Morse code works too.
Indian signals, smoke signals.
Smoke signals is great, actually. That's the best way. No, I mean, listen, I'm on LinkedIn. I think I get a lot of junk stuff there, but I always enjoy when I get a message that catches my attention, because it takes creativity when you reach out to somebody in today's age where everything is so convoluted. You got to have a message that resonates, that's compelling. And to do that, you got to research the person, you got to research what they do, what they like. And so I think this whole thing about reaching out to people, if anybody just says, hey, can you help mentor me? Or I've got, but if you have a really compelling reason, we're all busy, we all have time limitations. I think we need to practice more of the art of really fine-tuning the messaging that goes out, researching who we're targeting, and well, Dave, so as long as you send me.
I'm sorry, I was saying right in front of you right now, our producer Luke is going to be putting your LinkedIn address, of course, and what website should he put under there?
For website for what?
For your business, any of your businesses.
Well, I mean, we have a few brands. I mean, they can go to nichedigitalbrands.com that just shows kind of the different brands we have, but they could check out wildhoundcollars.com, which is pretty cool. You're able to customize even the hardware. Explore C4, C as in Charlie, number 4. And, yes, like the explosives. There's a reason for that, and yes, we blow our customers away. ExploreC4.com. And then mypoochface.com. And anyway, in my LinkedIn profile, they could probably find. And
we're going to have those listed for you right now on the video as well as we do it. Go ahead, Ted. Sorry.
This is tremendous stuff today. I can't thank you enough for taking the time out of your day to do this interview here on the Shrimp Tank. And listen, if you're an entrepreneur or a wantrepreneur out there, I mean, this is why you have to listen to people like David, like the insight that he gives today, anywhere from doing these Monday 15-minute meetings to the way that he's developed multiple businesses and he's managing them. But the one word I heard today that all business owners should have is intensity, because you've got to bring your A game to work every day. Your employees don't care whether you're having a good day or a bad day. You have to have a good day, right? You have to Bring that A game. And by the way, we have so many great entrepreneurs who are going to be interviewing the rest of this year. Very soon, we're bringing in Jeff Perkins, who's the CEO of Park Mobile. You know those little things when you go in and you park the four digits and you pay? We're going to have the CEO on and so many other great CEOs. I recommend that you re-watch this video today, what David talked about today. Check out all of his companies, everything in the Lefko group, niche digital brands, and everything else. He's doing great stuff. Thank you, David, for your time today, and we appreciate.
You're welcome. And since I'm a talker, I've got to that's word.
Yes.
Now we'll just add one term to the intensity. I would say relentless intensity. If you're not relentless, you cannot be an entrepreneur, because everything we do, if they told us all the hurdles, all the challenges, you would say it's impossible to pull it off. So unless you're all in, 100% relentless, it's very hard to become an entrepreneur, because the roller coaster ride is one for just masochists like us.
And, you know, to that point, Ted, think about it. And again, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that just happened, because David was relentless to get the last word. David, I will handle the microphone. No, in a respectful way, we will let David wrap us up, get the last word. And David, tell us what your experience was and sign us off today.
Listen, honestly, I don't want to have the last word. I just wanted to fit that in. So thank you for the opportunity. This was a lot of fun. Let me let Ted have the last word, because he hasn't been able to get too many words in because of my big mouth.
I like it, David. And I think you're setting the tone for the beginning of our shows. We're going to intro every show in 2022 with Be a Relentless Entrepreneur. That's going to be our code name for what you brought up today. Have relentless intensity. That's what you have to do as an entrepreneur to succeed here in 2022. Thanks so much for your time today. We truly appreciate it and coming on the Shrimp Tank.
Thanks, guys.
All right, we'll see y'all next week right here on the Shrimp Tank.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp